Hey guys, so we're going to do another photo analysis in this video. So this is a photo that was put on my Facebook, and when I saw it, something caught my attention and I want to talk about it. So there's a lot going on in this photo that I won't be getting into. There's many different things that could interpret all this going on as. But I do see one encoded message in particular with this. As we can see, we got jackets that say CBY and the other one says HABY. Well, this one says,
Okay, I found this on the web for Y as the other one says HABY. Check it out.
Siri. Always, sometimes interrupting. But anyways, this jacket says SBU. I know how to read Cyrillic, so it did take me very long to have this catch my attention. Not this one, but well, both of them together encodes a message that I could see anyways. So here it says SBU. This one says NABU. And I didn't know NABU was even a thing until I saw this image. So we're going to have ChatGPT analyze this for us. And I already went ahead and I have to redo this video because there was when I clicked on files and everything, you could actually see what was on my file manager. But that's why I had to skip a few steps here. I didn't want everyone to know what was in my business and on my computer and all that. So I had to skip that part. So here it is. So I'm telling ChatGPT to analyze this image. So I don't have to do it myself. It says here's a grounded visual analysis of what's shown without guessing identities. What's visible? The photo appears to be taken at night, outdoors, in an urban setting, apartment or office building in the background. There are 4 people standing close together in a formal interaction, not casual conversation. Dude, that's a little crazy that ChatGPT can actually see that instead of just seeing things abstractly. Faces are blurred. Faces are blurred either intentionally or for privacy or by the source. Clothing and markings. 2 individuals are wearing dark vests, jackets with large Cyrillic lettering. SBU. This is the Security Service of Ukraine. NABU. This is the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. These markings are official and typically used during law enforcement or investigative actions. Now, here's an interesting thing, and again, I'm not going to go into this, but why are we being shown this on Facebook between these 4 people, between these 2 people specifically? I'm not going to get into that, but the SPU does post a lot of images like this. But this one actually stood out more because this was more abstract than the other ones. These were just like 2 random people. And they do have photos like that show up every now and then, but this one really was unlike the others to me. It says objects and actions. One person is holding a folder or document packet, open, appearing to be present or read official papers. Remember, this is on public display. The body of the language suggests a procedural act, serving documents, notifying, questioning, not a casual or social encounter. No visible weapons, force, or physical restraint. Contextual interpretation, non-speculative. Joint presence of SBU and this is why I made this video, NABU, you know NABU, usually indicates an official investigation often related to corruption, state security, or high sensitivity legal matters. These agencies sometimes operate together when a case overlaps anti-corruption and national security domains. But again, why would that be on public display for anyone who is subscribed or following the SBU on Facebook? Like, why do I have this information? You could also ask that question, but that's not the purpose of this, me doing this analysis. The common posture and paperwork suggests a formal legal step, not an arrest or in progress. What cannot be determined: the identities or role of the civilians, the specific case charges or outcome, the exact location or date. Bottom line, the image documents what looks like a routine but serious Ukrainian law enforcement action involving SBU and NABU officers formally engaging individuals with official documents, likely as part of an investigation or legal notification. There's a lot of symbolism in this. But NABU, I didn't know this at the time. I had to Google it a little bit. I think it was created in 1996. It says, and I asked, what is the NABU? NABU is the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. That's exactly what it says. National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. Here's a clear no notice. What NABU is. It's specialized. Oh, it's 2015. Interesting. I read somewhere it was like 1996. Oh well. Anyways, a specialized independent law enforcement agency. Notice it says, that's interesting. It says specialized independent law enforcement agency, but they're standing right next to someone in an SBU jacket, which is also law enforcement. It's like I've said several times in the past. The SBU is the CIA and FBI basically put together. It's the ex-KGB of Ukraine in different letters. It says, created in 2015 after the Revolution of Dignity. Designed specifically to investigate high-level corruption. So that tells me that these aren't just any individuals. These are government officials that they're questioning. Unlike what he said earlier about them being civilians. So again, why are we being shown this on a public sphere to everybody on Facebook? What NABU handles, NABU does not go after small cases. It targets senior government officials, members of parliament, judges, ministers, head of state-owned enterprises, large state corruption schemes involving millions of dollars. And that's probably what this is about. Usually what the SBU has been doing a lot has been going into the fraud of millions of dollars. But this is the first time I've seen the NABU involved with this. Think of NABU as Ukraine's elite anti-corruption investigators. Now this is interesting. It's interesting what it said there. Not regular police. Same with SBU. Interesting how it says that. You might have not been able to catch that. I did instantly when I saw that. Okay, so let's... Should I talk about it now or should we wait? Let me skim over this. Okay, so I'm going to continue to read this, and then we're going to go back to this. Let me put that over here in my notes, just in case, so I don't forget. What NABU does not do. It does not persecute cases in court. That's handled by SAPO, the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. It is not a general police force. It does not deal with street crime. Why NABU matters. It was created under international pressure and reform requirements, the EU and the IMF. Its independence is legally protected because corruption was historically embedded at the highest levels. Regular law enforcement could not investigate political elites safely. The SBU is not regular law enforcement, and of course they do investigate. Like I said, it's the FBI, CIA put together. So it's very interesting why they have an NABU here. Obviously they're working together, but just interesting that they're together. Its very existence is a signal to the rest that Ukraine is trying to clean its system internally. But the SBU is in charge of it. And it's whatever the SBU says it is. You know, you see how there could be a little conflict there. Or maybe something that we cannot see happening behind the scenes in that lens. Why you often see Naboo with SBU? I haven't seen it before. When Naboo plus SBU appear together, it usually means the case involves both corruption and national security. Usually in Ukraine, those go hand in hand. Or the subject is very powerful, or there is risk of foreign influence, espionage, or state capture. Again, why are we seeing this on a public sphere like this? That combination is not routine, it's heavyweight. Simple analogy. Naboo is FBI, public corruption, inspector general, but more aggressive by design. The SBU is the FBI counterintelligence plus internal security. Like I just said, national security apparatus, the CIA, FBI. It's the ex-KGB, you know. If you know, you know. If you want, I can also explain how Naboo differs from SAPO and HACC. One, Naboo has been attacked politically inside Ukraine. How Naboo cases affect the U.S. session in Western support. How I would see Naboo is they're the part of the SVU that doesn't want to get the attention that the SVU would rather get if Naboo didn't. So they're kind of like the mask and the disguise that the SVU could carry out themselves, but instead of getting all the flack and all the pressure and all that, it goes to a proxy, if you will. So let's go back to, and this is why I created this video, is because we're going back to where it says, think of Naboo as Ukraine's elite anti-corruption investigators. Now, think about that for a moment. Naboo, we got this thing known as Naboo, and there have the elite anti-corruption investigators. What does that sound like to you? Just throwing it out there. What does that sound like to you? Sounds, well, Naboo, obviously it's pronounced as Naboo, as in Star Wars Episode 1. And the elite anti-corruption investigators, well, you could see those as like the Jedi. So, is that done on purpose? Was that done on accident? Is that just coincidence? Does it have implications of the consequences, even if no one caught on to that? So, it's like those kinds of things where it aligns to other things I've talked about. But it's shown in this way where it's like, I would say it's less intentional, but then at the same time it has the same outcome, so it doesn't really matter if it's intentional or whether it's coincidence. It still has the same, well, in hindsight, it's going to be like, oh, it all connects. It doesn't matter if it's coincidence or not, it's how it's perceived. It just does. So I think of Naboo as Ukraine's elite anti-corruption investigators. That needs another quote. I said, that sounds a lot like Naboo in the Jedi of Episode 1. It just does. Yes, the resemblance is real and at the level of sound and symbolism, but it's coincidence rather than intent. That said, your instinct isn't wrong in why it feels similar. The surface similarity. Naboo is the planet in the Phantom Menace. Phonetically, Naboo versus Naboo. Well, Naboo or Naboo. Is it Naboo? Naboo. Anyways, it's the same thing. Basically identical in English. Both get framed as clean, principled, guardian entities in their respective stories. So your brain is doing pattern recognition, not fantasy. The deeper parallel where it actually works. In episode 1, Naboo represents a corruption-free ideal. The Jedi are outside normal politics. It does sound like that. They investigate corruption the Senate is too compromised to see. Their presence signals this is bigger than local politics. Yeah, that's exactly, and that's what I've said before with people. I said Naboo is analogous, how do you pronounce the word, to Ukraine. And that's what I saw. When I first saw episode 1, and I saw Anakin and all that, I was like, this looks a lot like Ukraine. But then I told it to someone who really loves Star Wars, and they're like, no, because Naboo is a large planet. It has nothing to do with, but you know, I can't dismiss the similarities here. And now that we have something known as Naboo in Ukraine, it's like, is it kind of like a callback to what someone would see? So it's very interesting. You know, sometimes sometimes life imitates art, and other times art imitates life, even at the time you don't realize it, or it might seem as coincidence, but the point remains. And the SBU is sort of like Jedi, in a way. Same way that the CIA are like Jedi, and they're outside of normal politics. You have to be if you're doing national security. You got to see outside what the average person sees. In real life, Naboo was created because normal institutions were compromised. It sits outside traditional power chains. It investigates elites ordinary law enforcement couldn't touch. Its presence signals this case bypasses the usual shields. Now, I will say this. I'm not Ukrainian. I wasn't born in Ukraine. So, how you would see the SBU is like on a very high level. But if you're outside, like I'm an American, and I can see outside, I can see that the SBU is at a level that an outsider can understand. Since you're not inside, you wouldn't see them as above you. And I use that reflection for the CIA and everyone else, the FBI and everybody. And that's how I'm able to look above what the average American can see, because those are the vertical is aligned, and you can make pattern recognition between the two. So that's how I can see things like that. Or better said, I can see that because I can see above and not below. And I mentioned that in a previous video, I haven't made a video yet specifically talking about that, but I made a point of that in my video that I did for the Q&A for December 20th. And I kind of go into detail of that. It says, that's the functional overlap, not lore, not destiny, just structure. Important grounding point. There is no intentional Star Wars reference in the name. Naboo is a Ukrainian acronym. The coincidence is linguistic, not symbolic by design. Bureaucracies don't name agencies after sci-fi planets, unfortunately. This is actually not true. This might, maybe in government, but there are times where bureaucracy, again, it's the vertical. It's about who's in charge. This is a tangent, but it brought it up. But there was one that did use Star Wars in the name intentionally. It was direct point for point. But we're going to talk about that. Let me write that down in my notes. I'm using terms that you won't know, but this is what ChatGPT would. This is what ChatGPT will understand. If you know, you know. but we're gonna go into it. And they're planning going this direction, but because it brought it up to sci-fi planets, it wasn't about planets, but it was involving Star Wars. Let me think. And it wasn't just episode 1. I think there might have been an episode 1 reference, but it was the older Star Wars. Even though they were doing this around the same time. Although I think this was being done before Phantom Menace came out. Either way, we're going to look into that. Why comparisons still make sense. Good storytelling and real-world reform often converge on the same archetypes. Corruption is hidden rot, special investigators, outside order, or even internal order, if you would, like the Jedi. But even though the Jedi was more outside, I don't know. They were very elite. In fact, I would wager that most people in the Star Wars universe, like the average person, didn't even know that Jedi even existed. You know, that could have been like a myth or a conspiracy. Most people would not know that the Jedi would actually exist. But there were people like Anakin's mom and all them. Now, I don't know how they knew that Jedi existed, but Anakin knew who they were, and so did his mom. He's like, is Anakin going to become a Jedi? Even though that most people, unless they knew that stuff, wouldn't know they even Jedi existed. So, interesting point on that. Resistance equals entrenched power. George Lucas borrows those archetypes from history. Modern institutions, sometimes we create them under pressure. Sometimes and it can create something, not intentionally, but something that can be reflected on later on. They're like, oh, all this stuff goes together. Whether it was coincidence or not, it makes everything make sense. Bottom line, and we're seeing that story getting told. So bottom line, you're not saying Naboo is Jedi. You're noticing that both occupy the same narrative role. An external force created because the system couldn't police itself. That's a valid analytical comparison. Just keep it framed as structural analogy, not symbolic destiny. So, I know that you're not going to be able to understand terms I'm about to use here, but ChatGPT is going to do it. So, I posted here, Enron internal name schemes for mark-to-market accounting. I'm not going to explain what mark-to-market accounting is, but I'm not going to explain what Enron is. But it's going to give us the rundown. It's a tangent, but ChatGPT brought it up to show you that, yes, they do name things after Star Wars. We're looking at this. Enron actually did use Star Wars style internal code names. See, I didn't have to say Star Wars, I already knew. If you know, you know. For structures tied to mark-to-market accounting and off-balance sheet maneuvers. This is documented and not speculative. Mark-to-market accounting, mark-to-market at Enron, context first. Enron used mark-to-market MTM accounting to book future projected profits immediately. Once profits were booked, losses later had to be hidden. That's why the special purpose entities, SPEs, came in, and that's what they were. They were named after Star Wars. These SPEs were given internal code names, many of them deliberately playful or sci-fi themed. Key Enron internal name scheme: Jedi, one of the earliest SPEs, used to move debt off Enron's balance sheet. Name clearly references Star Wars Jedi, meant to sound elite, controlled, and trusted. Irony: Jedi was supposed to balance the force of our earnings. See, they had that symbolism going on. Chewco, obviously Chewie, created to buy out and outside investors so Jedi could remain off books. Name is a direct reference to Chewbacca, or Chewie. This structure failed independence tests, making Jedi illegally retroactively. Chewco is often cited as a technical point where accounting fraud became undeniable. Raptor vehicles. Raptor 1 through... What is that? 1 through... Is that 6? The most infamous, designed to hedge Enron's own stock using Enron's own stock, which is not a hedge at all. Named after predators, not Star Wars, signaling aggression. I saw that more as a Jurassic Park reference. You know, raptors. Raptors collapsed when Enron stock fell, instant implosion. LJM1, LJM2, named after CFO Andrew Vostell's wife and kids, Leia, interesting, Jeffrey, and Matthew. Yeah. These were private partnerships run by Enron's own CFO. Bought bad assets from Enron at inflated prices. This crossed from creative accounting into self-dealing fraud. White Wing. Now I haven't heard of this one. White Wing. Large SBU used to park assets in debt. Less playful name, more corporate angel imagery. Still used to keep liabilities hidden. So it was a whole accounting fraud scheme. Why the naming matters. These names weren't accidental. They normalized wrongdoing internally, turned fraud into a game. It's interesting how we're talking about the NABU being anti-corruption, and they're using these Jedi names and Star Wars names for corruption. Interesting. Very interesting play there. Turn fraud into a game, reduce psychological friction. It's just Jedi doing its thing. Encourage groupthink and detachment from consequences. This is now a case study in ethics and behavioral finance. The pattern important. You'll notice a progression. Playful names like Jedi and Chuko. Predatory names, named Raptor. Personal names, LJM. And collapse. That arc mirrors Enron's moral decay. Bottom line, yes, Enron used mark-to-market accounting to front-load profits, hid losses in SPEs with sci-fi and symbolic internal names, and those names are now part of forensic accounting history. Explain why MTM, market-to-market accounting, isn't illegal, but Enron's use of it was. Map Enron's structure to modern crypto SPAC failures, or show how naming culture predicts institutional failure. Just say the word. But yeah, it's very interesting how the anti-corruption of, like I just said, of Naboo, and it's Star Wars, Naboo, and they use Star Wars references in Enron, and that's corruption. You know, it's a very interesting thing, and it's like the SBU is like in between those, watching this as it happens. But yeah, this was, the Enron thing was a big deal, if you want to read about it. It was in Houston, Texas. I was actually living in Houston. No, I wasn't living. I was living in Houston when Enron was a thing, but I left. I was in the east of Texas. At the time, this whole thing, which was in December of 2001. So yeah, you can read about that. Interesting. I mean, I wasn't planning on talking about Enron, but since he brought that up, I wanted to show that yes, that does happen. So yeah, guys, tell me what you think in this one. Again, I'm just poking out one interpretation out of this, a coherent interpretation out of this image. But there are many you could see out of this. Like, why are we being shown this? Who are these two people? Are they officials? Do Ukrainians know them? Do they, who are they? I have a post about that, but it didn't really give much detail. But yeah, I'll end it here, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.